The moment is here, you can stop your search. It's Comics by Perch.
Hey everybody, this is Perch, and I'm talking to you from Switzerland. Came over here to do a little bit of business, and it's a nice country, different. Reminds me a lot of the Pacific Northwest in terms of climate right now. It's kind of overcast, rainy, but still very beautiful. Yes, you put your jokes in now. The guy who gets accused of fence sitter is hanging out in Switzerland. So, I mean, the jokes write themselves. At that point, if you're taking advantage of that joke, I think you're just being lazy at this particular moment. But as I do when I come to places, I like to go check out the newsstand, or in this case, the co-op, which is like basically a grocery store. If you're familiar with kind of a Fred Meyer in the Pacific Northwest, or maybe a oh God, what's it? The Texas equivalent. Anyway, I'm tired and sleep deprived, so you'll forgive me if it doesn't come immediately to mind. But anyway, it's basically a grocery store with a little bit more to it, and I go looking for the comics. Now, generally speaking, most of the tiny pop-up newsstands have some Disney comics. Donald Duck looks like older stuff. Didn't see much Archie here, and then plenty of Asterix and a couple other kind of very European type comics. But the thing that caught my eye is I walk into this grocery store, and they have got a comic book graphic novel shelf, and a pretty large one, close to the register. In fact, it's kind of built in such a way that you get your food and you have to pass by this thing in order to check out. And there's this large graphic, and it's aimed both on the, you read into things. The height placement is a little lower. It's clearly trying to attract the kids. And on it, of course, more asterisks, lots of European graphic novels and everything else. And then I spot something I hadn't seen before. Now, I've seen the Panini graphic novels and what they do, but I haven't seen this format. And it basically, what caught my eye was there's a big picture of Thanos. And it looked like, I couldn't exactly pinpoint the artist, but it looked like maybe Mike Deodato. It was a little hard to tell, but it was a very bold cover. And on the cover said Thanos. That's it. And then, then in smaller letters above that, you had Donny Cates' name. So it's like, I've never seen that image associated with this presented. It's very strange. So I go over and I look, and they're hardbound, hard graphic novels, hard shell, and they're all the same size. And there was about 10, 12 different ones ultimately in this area. And what was very curious about it is they were numbered. And if you put the spines together, if you lay them out, you got a picture of a bunch of characters in the Marvel Universe. Wolverine, Thor, Thanos is mentioned. It wasn't just the MCU characters either. There were plenty that had not made their way into Marvel yet, or into the movies yet. Like, for example, Wolverine. I know Wolverine's had a movie, but I mean in the MCU. So it wasn't an MCU-based play. But they were really, it was a nice high quality production, but they were also all the same size. So I was looking at that, I'm like, you've got Thanos there, you've got Thor, which was the Jane Foster version of Thor, that run, and you have a bunch of different things, but they were all exactly the same length. And I'm like, I know the comic books don't add up that way. So I pick it up and I start thumbing through it, and I'm looking at these, and the paper was really nice, high quality gloss, again hardcover. Good printing. Color looked really nice. Like sometimes the hardcovers, the trades, the color gets all whacked out, but not these. They looked really quite solid, and they represented a somewhat odd collection of the comics themselves. The Thanos by Cates looked like the entire run of that series, along with a little bit of additional material. And the Thor run with Jane Foster was that first version that kind of led into Secret Wars. It gave you the whole opening. And then the Wolverine was the origin, but it was just kind of it was a different presentation. And I was quite impressed. It looked really, really nice. I thought that the collection looked good. The books looked good. They were priced at a fairly reasonable rate. I think the US dollar equivalent was $16. So it was a hardcover with quite a bit of content. It was deceptive because the paper they used was the thinner paper, but it was still printed glossy. It felt reasonable. It felt like paper that wasn't going to rip the first time you pull it out. And the fact they were all the same size meant that you could line them up on the shelf. So for the bookseller, it was quite convenient. The name and everything was really clearly printed, and they even had numbers like 1, 2, 3. So it kind of encouraged you to buy the set. It was what was going on. It was great. I looked at it. I'm like, man, this beats the hell out of anything that's going on in the U.S. We've seen those pictures from Barnes and Noble and other places where you see 50 different sizes of the trade paperback and different height, different makeup, completely different printing on the side, just as a zoo. And a lot of people compare that to manga, which on the shelf looks very clean, nice and orderly, same size, nice trade dress, everything's lined up really nicely. And I look at it and I go, this would easily compete with manga in terms of kind of the presentation, the format. And, the comics themselves kind of took the best of the material. So in many cases, to keep the same size, they add in a couple other stories to the book, but they were relevant stories. If you bought it, it made sense. The Jane Foster Thor, and I'm still blown away. I know I did a video on this before, but I do not understand why people go to crazy lengths to want to deny that thing sold, because it did. We've done the numbers video. We've proved it. People like to bring up the most far-reaching bend over backwards scenarios, like Marvel was cheating or somehow overshipped all these. They didn't. Or the comic stores ordering this, but they weren't actually selling any. There's tons in the penny bin. There's not. Look at the value of those comics. I mean, it's very, frankly, if you're a comic shop, and people like to say, it's like, oh, all those Thor's issues are in the quarter bin. Well, for the love of God, idiot, go buy them for a quarter and flip them, because you see what they're worth on eBay. Like, you can make yourself a tidy little profit from some sucker that's willing to pay $8, $10 for some of those comics. If you find them in the quarter bin, go nuts. Put your money where your mouth is. But anyway, my point in all this is, if you wanted to read that first volume of Jane Foster is Thor, but it was a mystery, we didn't know it was Jane Foster until it was revealed at the end. It was all collected there, and that's what people bought. I mean, that sold well in the original issues in the U.S. So you got a complete story of this character's kind of journey. That was clever. The thing that strikes me when I look at it, and there's just no better way to say it. I mean, you look at this stuff and you just want to go to the Marvel offices and you just want to grab Cebulski and you want to just shake the hell out of him, or Quesada or Buckley or some of these people, and go, guys, the answer is right in front of you. Like, literally, it's this. Panini is doing it right. Like, stop thinking and just copy that. Just do that. The format would do great in the U.S. And to prove it, I mean, again, aren't you tired? If you're listening to this video right now, aren't you a little tired of the comparisons to manga? Like, I mean, at what point do we have to just admit, hey, we're tired of talking about how manga looks better on the shelf and their trade dress is better and they have their shit together? They do. But I mean, at what point does it just become sad? Well, I'll give you the answer to that. It's sad now. And it's just particularly sad for Marvel, and DC does the same, by the way. There's only a couple DC books on the shelf, but they were similarly put together. Why is it that the licensor, in this case Panini, who's putting these volumes together for Europe, why is it that they're able to do a dramatically better job than the parent company, than Marvel or DC? Why? Because it isn't close. It's not like, this is a little bit better. It's a hell of a lot better. And that's, quite frankly, if you are somebody who's in the grocery store, you're a, quote, normie, and you do not collect comics, you don't go to the direct market, you don't do any of that, it's right there in front of you. Just this is what's going to pull you in. You see something that looks relatively attractive, you recognize, like, oh, Thanos, that was a villain in the Avengers, I think I'll buy this. You open it up, you got a comic. Same thing with the Jane Foster version of Thor. It's like the movie's coming out. We know she's in the comic, or in that movie. Here's a comic. She's on the cover. You pick it up. You get her complete story, start to finish. The end. It's just good. It's just good marketing. You're nuts if you don't do something like this. So I was very impressed to see it. I was pleased and impressed that this existed, and disappointed, because once again, it's like, hey, Marvel, just start copying what works. It's really pathetic that people are able to do better with your own content, with your own characters than you are. The home base is screwing it up where the licensors are getting it right. And I mean, you could save yourself some money by just canning the people you currently have and basically asking Panini to do it for you. I mean, like, give us the templates of what you did over there. We'll just ship it over here. It would sell great. It's crazy to think about. Anyway, little observation from the road. Hope you all are doing well. Thank you for listening. Thank you for subscribing, as always, making this channel successful. And thank you for listening.